I always believed a home could heal anything. A scraped knee, a broken heart, even the kind of pain that doesn't show up on your skin. I built mine from hope, faith, and a whole lot of hard work. The house on Maple Street, that old white two-story with blue shutters, wasn't much to anyone else. But to me, it was everything I ever dreamed of having. I remember the first night I slept here. The walls still smelled of fresh paint, and there were no curtains yet, just the moonlight spilling across the floorboards. I lay on an old mattress with my 2 children, Adam and Claire, curled against me. Adam was 8 then, already so protective of his little sister. Claire was 5, still soft with baby curls. They asked if this house would always be ours. I promised it would. I was a widow at 30. My husband Tom worked at the mill, a hard man with kind eyes, gone one rainy morning in a factory accident. I didn't have time to cry back then. 2 mouths to feed, debts to pay, and a world that doesn't slow down for broken hearts. So I worked. Days at the diner, nights sewing clothes for the ladies on Elm Street. Every nail in that house came from my paychecks and blistered hands. I never took a loan, never asked for help. That house wasn't just built from wood, it was built from me. Now, 50 years later, I water the same garden every morning. My back aches, my knees protest, but I still hum while I work. The tulips come up every spring just the way Tom used to like them, red and yellow, standing proud under the porch. People in town still wave when they pass by. They call me Miss Maggie, the old lady who never left Maple Street. But what they don't see is the silence, the long, hollow silence that fills this house where laughter once lived. My children, they don't visit much anymore. Adam calls sometimes, usually when he needs something. Hey Ma, can you sign this form for me? Or I'm short this month, can you send a check? Always busy, always hurried. Claire sends texts, short and polite, as if I'm one of her clients. Hi Mom, hope you're well, we'll come by soon. That soon has stretched for almost a year now. I don't blame them entirely. Life is fast now. People have their jobs, their homes, their own families. But sometimes I wonder if they ever remember who kept the lights on for them when they were small. This morning I was baking an apple pie when I heard a knock. For a second my heart leapt. Maybe Claire finally made it. But when I opened the door, both of them were there. Adam in his tailored suit, Claire with her fancy handbag and that tight smile she wears when she's uncomfortable. Well, would you look at that? I said, forcing a grin. My babies, all grown and coordinated. They laughed politely. Adam hugged me. The kind of hug that smells like aftershave and distance. Claire barely touched my shoulder. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured coffee. They didn't drink it. They just exchanged glances, like they were about to break bad news gently. Mom, Adam began, we've been talking about the house. My heart sank a little. What about it? Claire leaned forward. Property taxes are rising, maintenance is expensive, and this neighbourhood isn't safe for you anymore. You shouldn't have to live alone like this. I smiled faintly. I've been doing it for 40 years, darling. Adam sighed. That's exactly it. You've done enough. We think it's time to make things easier for you. He took out a folder, papers clipped neatly, a lawyer's name at the bottom. Claire slid it across the table toward me. It's a joint ownership transfer, Mom, she said softly. This way, we can help with the taxes and upkeep. You'll still live here, of course, but it'll make things simpler. Something in my chest tightened. I looked at the papers, the legal words blurred. Joint ownership? I repeated. Why would you need your names on it? The house is fine. Claire smiled, her voice honey-sweet. It's just a formality. You trust us, right? I did. God help me, I did. I'd spent my life teaching them honesty and compassion. I'd worked myself sick to give them a chance in life. Of course, I trusted them. So I signed. They left soon after, saying they had meetings and errands. The smell of their perfume and cologne lingered long after the door closed. I sat in the kitchen staring at the empty chairs, my pie cooling untouched on the counter. Something felt wrong, but I told myself not to be foolish. They were just helping me. That's what good children do, right? That night, I took out the old family photo album, the one with the cracked leather spine. There was Adam in his high school football uniform, grinning with a chipped tooth. There was Claire on prom night, her corsage too big for her wrist. I ran my fingers over their faces and whispered, "You'll always have this home. Always." 2 weeks passed. Then a letter came from the county office. New property records. My name was still there, but beneath it were two more. Adam Hensley and Claire Simmons. Joint owners. I stared at the letter for a long time. Something in me felt unsteady. It wasn't about the paper. It was about the feeling. Like a small crack had appeared somewhere deep inside my heart. That night, I sat on the porch under the creaking fan, listening to the crickets. The stars were out, same as always, but they didn't feel comforting anymore. For the first time, I wondered if maybe my children saw this house not as a home, but as something to own. I pushed that thought away. A mother should never think that way about her own kids. But somewhere in the back of my mind, the thought stayed, quiet but sharp. And I didn't know it then, but that signature I gave them, that single act of trust, it would be the beginning of the greatest betrayal of my life. I thought I had seen the worst of life when Tom died. I thought losing him was a heartbreak that would last forever. But the next 2 weeks proved me wrong. It started small. Adam called one morning. "Mom, we've been talking, you know, about the house." I smiled politely. "Yes, dear, I remember." "It's for your own good," he said, voice careful, smooth like oil. "The neighbourhood is changing. The town council is raising taxes. Insurance is going up. It's just easier if we manage it together." I wanted to tell him I had been managing it for 50 years. I wanted to say, I've lived here through rainstorms, snowstorms and heartbreaks. I don't need easier. But I nodded instead. Then came Claire's message. "Mom, why don't you let us handle things? It'll take a huge load off your shoulders." I tried to sleep that night, but the house felt different. Every creak of the floorboards sounded sharper. The wind rattled the shutters like it was whispering warnings. Even the cat, old Jasper, wouldn't curl up beside me. He just stared at the hallway, ears twitching, tail flicking. I pushed the feeling away. They were my children. I trusted them. The real trouble started the next Monday. A lawyer came by, not one I had chosen, not someone I knew, but Adam's lawyer. He came with a smile that didn't reach his eyes and papers that smelled like money and steel. "Mrs. Hensley," he said, nodding politely, "these documents are just formalities. Sign here, here and here. Your children have requested some changes to the joint ownership arrangement. Nothing to worry about." I signed. My hands trembled, but I signed. I trusted them. Always had, always would. That evening, Adam called again. "Mom, maybe it's time you thought about a senior facility. It's just safer. You'd have company, meals prepared, medical staff." I laughed nervously. "Safer than my own home?" He hesitated, then said, "It's just for a while, until we sort things out." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. The next week, Claire texted, "We'll visit this weekend. Promise." They never came. A few days later, a moving company showed up at my door. "Mrs. Hensley, we've been instructed to help you move your things." I blinked. I'm not moving." The foreman shrugged. "We're just following instructions." I called Adam. No answer. I called Claire. No reply. The world tilted on its axis. The house that had been my life, my sanctuary, my fortress of memories, was no longer mine. That night I sat on the porch and stared at the garden. The tulips still bloomed, red and yellow, standing proud as if mocking me. I thought about Adam's first day of school, how he had held my hand, scared of the big yellow bus. I remembered Claire's first recital, how she had refused to go on stage until I whispered, "You can do this, my little star." And I realised, these children, the very ones I had sacrificed for, were strangers now. I cried quietly, afraid the neighbours would hear. The thought that my own children could treat me this way burned hotter than any storm I had endured. Flashbacks came unbidden. Selling my wedding ring to pay for Adam's college tuition. Working double shifts at the diner to buy Claire her first piano. Nights sitting by their beds, tucking blankets around them, whispering stories until they fell asleep. And now they had taken everything. A week later, a staff member at the senior facility mentioned casually, "Your kids sold the house, Mrs. Hensley, got a huge sum for it. They're renovating their city homes now." I felt something break inside me. Not my body, that had been breaking for years, but something else, a seed of fury, a spark of something I hadn't felt since Tom's accident. The betrayal cut deep. This wasn't just property, this was my life, my love, my sacrifices, my heart, and they thought they could erase it all with signatures and smiles. That night I didn't cry. I didn't pray. I sat quietly, listening to the wind shake the shutters, the distant hum of cars on Main Street, and I made a decision. They wanted my pain. They wanted me to vanish quietly. Well, I had something they weren't expecting: time, patience, and a mind that remembered every injustice. I would get my house back. I would teach them that betrayal has consequences, and I would make them remember who I was. Not the weak mother they thought I was, but the woman who built a home from nothing and could tear down their illusions with her bare hands. Flashbacks returned. Tom teaching me to handle tools, telling me, "Maggie, we can make anything from nothing." My mother's words before she died: "Never let anyone think they can take what's yours, not even your own flesh and blood." I closed my eyes and felt the fury settle in like a steady flame. This wasn't over. It was only just beginning. And they came for me early on a Thursday morning. The moving van was already parked outside when I opened my eyes. Sunlight spilled across the garden, illuminating the tulips that still stood tall, oblivious to the storm about to break. "Mrs. Hensley?" A man in a blue uniform called politely. "We're here to help you pack your things." I blinked. "Pack my things? I'm not moving." Adam's lawyer was standing behind him, clipboard in hand, looking calm, unbothered over just another item to be moved along. "Margaret," Adam said, voice even, almost too gentle, "it's for your own good. You'll see, the facility is comfortable, safe, and the staff will take care of you." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Safe? My own home is safe. My friends are here. The memories are here. I don't need anyone else to take care of me." Claire stepped forward, her smile tight, rehearsed. "Mom, it's just temporary. You'll like it. Promise." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them I wasn't a child, that I had raised them, that I had poured every ounce of my being into this family and this home, but the words stuck in my throat. By noon, I was in the van, watching the house recede from view. The blue shutters, the porch swing, the garden that smelled faintly of rain and cinnamon. My life, my sanctuary, my heart, all gone. The senior facility wasn't bad. The staff were kind, the rooms clean, the meals hot, but I felt like a ghost walking through a place that wasn't mine. Every corner whispered a subtle reminder that I had been replaced. That evening, I wandered the halls, tracing my fingers along the railings. Other residents smiled politely, offered me small greetings, but none saw the rage and heartbreak simmering under my calm exterior. I thought about Adam and Claire, about how they had smiled, shook my hand, promised me comfort and security, only to sell my home behind my back, move me away and pretend it was all for my own good. I sat by the window that overlooked the small courtyard, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft gold and crimson. I let the tears come, silent, bitter tears, for the life I had built, for the children I had trusted, for the betrayal that cut deeper than any storm or accident ever could. The turning point came a few days later. A young nurse handed me a tablet, saying, "You might want to see this, Mrs. Hensley." Local news. I frowned and took it, scrolling through headlines until one caught my eye. "Hensley House sold. Children cash in on family property." I stared at the photo of my house, freshly painted, manicured lawn, Adam and Claire smiling in front of it as if they had never been part of my life. They had not only taken my home, they had paraded it like a trophy. My hands shook, my chest tightened. But this time, I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I didn't even despair. Something else was rising inside me. A cold, steady fire. I began keeping a journal. Every detail I could remember, every paper I had signed, every conversation they had tricked me into, I wrote it down. I made friends among the staff and residents, subtly asking questions, collecting pieces of information about my children's financial moves and their dealings with lawyers. Walter Briggs, the retired attorney who had once worked with Tom, reached out after hearing my story through mutual friends in town. He had sharp eyes and a mind like a steel trap. When I told him everything, he didn't hesitate. "We can fix this," he said. "We can take it back." For the first time since losing the house, I slept with a purpose. Flashbacks haunted me that night. I remembered Adam's first bicycle, how he fell and scraped his knee, and how I held him on my lap until the tears stopped. I remembered Claire, the first time she played a song on the piano, her small fingers fumbling and the pride in her eyes as I clapped. I remembered every late night, every missed meal, every ache in my body that I ignored because I had two small lives depending on me. And now they had treated all of it as if it never mattered. The betrayal cut deep. But the fire in me, the one that had kept me going through widowhood, poverty and exhaustion, that fire was alive. I would not fade quietly. I would not be forgotten. I would take back what was mine. And when I did, Adam and Claire would remember, painfully, unmistakably, the mother they had betrayed. Auntie May would tell you this is the moment where the story turns, where the victim stops being a victim, where the sorrow turns into purpose. And that night, lying on the thin mattress in a room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and old carpet, I plotted my return. I didn't know how it would unfold. I didn't know how long it would take. But I knew one thing with perfect clarity. The Hensley house wasn't gone. It was waiting for me, and I would reclaim it. Not just for the bricks and walls, but for every memory, every tear, every sacrifice I had ever made. The first time I let myself feel real anger, I surprised even myself. For weeks after moving into the senior facility, I had been quiet, polite, invisible. I smiled at the staff, nodded to the residents, kept to myself. I didn't cry, I didn't beg. I waited. But anger is a strange companion. It sneaks in quietly, coats itself around your heart, and then one day, it sparks. For me, it sparked the night I saw Adam's city home in that glossy magazine, the one he had bought with the money from my house. I sat in my room, the muted TV humming, the dim light from the hallway brushing the edges of my small desk. I held a pen, opened a notebook and began writing. I would get my house back. I would show them that the woman they thought helpless was anything but. I would make them remember every lesson I had taught them, the ones they had ignored, mocked or broken. That's when Walter Briggs came into my life. He had been a friend of Tom's, a retired attorney with a reputation for integrity and cunning. When he first visited, I half expected him to scold me, to tell me I was too old, too frail, too polite for the fight ahead. Instead, he smiled and said, "Margaret, it's about time someone taught those kids a lesson. You've waited long enough." We sat together over coffee in the facility's small lounge, going through every piece of paper I still had, bank statements, old deeds, tax receipts, letters I had kept from Adam and Claire, every small sacrifice I had made, every penny I had spent, every document I had signed, became evidence in my mind. Walter's eyes gleamed. "With this, we can reverse everything. They can't hide what you've done for them, and they can't pretend they didn't take advantage of you." I nodded, trying to hide the thrill that coursed through me. For the first time in weeks, I slept well that night. The next few weeks were a blur of careful planning. I made lists. I interviewed neighbours discreetly. I called old friends who still remembered the Hensleys as they were, the family I had raised with love and sacrifice. I traced every transaction Adam and Claire had made, every move they had carried out to profit from my house. I wrote letters in my notebook, letters I didn't plan to send. They were confessions, reminders, pieces of truth I would one day reveal when the time was right. Flashbacks came, of course. I remembered Adam's first heartbreak in high school, how he sat on my lap and cried, and I whispered that it would pass. I remembered Claire, scared of her first recital, how I had held her trembling hands and told her she was brave. I remembered selling my wedding ring to buy textbooks, working double shifts at the diner, nights spent sewing dresses for the school play. And here they were, standing over the house I had built, living the life I had created for them and forgetting every sacrifice. Walter taught me about leverage. "Margaret," he said one afternoon, leaning back in his chair, "you don't need to be cruel. You just need to be precise. Evidence, timing, and the town's memory, that's your arsenal." I listened, taking notes. Every legal precedent, every loophole, every detail of their missteps was a potential weapon. And while Walter worked on the law, I worked on the story. I started by talking to neighbours, casual conversations, a smile here, a compliment there. "Did you hear about Adam and Claire?" I would murmur, letting curiosity do the work. I made a list of witnesses who could testify to my contributions, my payments, and the promises Adam and Claire had broken. It felt like weaving a net, one that would catch my children unawares. The night I finalised the plan, I sat by the window in my room at the facility. The stars twinkled above, and the wind rustled the leaves outside. I whispered to no one in particular, "This isn't just about a house. It's about every tear, every sleepless night, every moment they thought I wouldn't notice." And I realised I didn't want just revenge, I wanted justice. I wanted them to remember that the mother they thought helpless was stronger than they could ever imagine. I closed my notebook, feeling a strange sense of calm. The storm was coming. When Walter told me the papers had been filed, my hands trembled so hard I nearly dropped my teacup. It wasn't fear anymore, it was something sharper, heavier, the kind of weight you feel before a storm breaks. He'd filed a formal claim challenging the transfer of my property. Fraud, manipulation, and elder coercion. Those were the words written in thick, black ink. My name stood above them. Margaret Hensley versus Adam Hensley and Claire Hensley. For the first time, my name wasn't just a signature at the bottom of someone else's life. It was the headline. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late autumn. Willow Creek was glowing with rust-coloured leaves and a whisper of winter air. When I arrived at the courthouse, I wore my best coat, the one Tom had bought for our anniversary 30 years ago. Adam was there already, standing near the entrance with his wife, Anna. His jaw tightened when he saw me. He looked like a man trying to pretend he still had control, though the sweat on his forehead said otherwise. Claire arrived a few minutes later, wearing a sharp navy suit. She didn't meet my eyes. She walked past me as if I were a stranger. For a moment, I almost faltered. My children, my flesh and blood, standing against me. But then I remembered that afternoon. They sent me away, their cold words echoing in my ears. I straightened my shoulders. "Let's begin," I whispered to myself. Inside the courtroom, the air smelled of old wood and tension. The judge was an older woman named Judge Morrison, stern, with a heart-shaped brooch pinned to her lapel. She looked like someone who had seen every kind of deceit a family could manage. Walter began his argument, calm and sharp as a blade. He presented the bank statements, showing the account withdrawals I'd made for the down payment on the house. He showed the emails Adam had sent to the realtor, where he claimed I was happy to move into assisted living. He read aloud the text messages where Claire joked about finally convincing Mom to sign. Each word hit the courtroom like a hammer. When it was their turn, Adam tried to sound reasonable. He said I'd been struggling with my memory, that they'd only done what was best for me. Claire nodded along, tears carefully placed in the corners of her eyes. But then Walter asked one question that changed everything. "Mrs. Hensley," he said, turning to Claire, "would you please explain the $180,000 wire transfer made from your mother's account to your own 2 days before she was placed in the care facility?" The room went silent. Claire froze. Adam looked at her confused, and for the first time I saw fear flicker in their eyes. It turned out that Walter had found it all. Every hidden transfer, every quiet manipulation. He had built a wall of evidence so strong it could not be ignored. But that wasn't the most powerful part. The most powerful part came when Judge Morrison looked at me and said gently, "Mrs. Hensley, would you like to speak?" I stood. My voice shook at first, but it found its rhythm, like a river breaking through a dam. "I gave my children everything," I began. "Every dream, every dollar, every ounce of love I had. I worked 2 jobs to build that house. I watched my husband die in that house. And when it came time for me to need them, they took it away. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to." The courtroom was silent except for the faint rustle of papers. "I'm not here because I want their money," I continued. "I'm here because I want my dignity. I want the world, this town, to remember who I really am." I looked straight at Adam and Claire. "You took my home. You forgot who built it. But you'll remember today that I am not a woman who breaks easily." When I finished, even the judge seemed to pause a moment before speaking. Her ruling came a week later. The property transfer was void. The court found that coercion had occurred. The house, the savings, and my legal independence were all restored to me. Adam and Claire were ordered to repay what they had taken. Walter smiled when he told me the verdict, but I didn't smile back right away. The victory was sharp, bittersweet, because revenge, real revenge, isn't about watching others fall. It's about standing again after they thought you never would. The local newspaper ran the story, "Elderly Woman Wins Landmark Case Against Her Children." For a week, my name was on everyone's lips. People I hadn't seen in years came to visit. Old neighbours left flowers by my door. When I returned to Maple Street, the air felt different. I stood in the front yard, looking up at the house that once echoed with laughter and betrayal. The boards creaked, the wind brushed the curtains. It felt alive again, as if it had been waiting for me. That night, I brewed myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, just like I used to. Outside, the porch light flickered, and the wind carried the scent of autumn through the trees. And though I had won, a small ache remained, not for the house, not for the money, but for the love I had lost along the way. Still, I felt something else too. Peace. Because I had done what few ever dared, I'd taken back my life on my own terms, and for the first time in years I whispered softly to myself, I'm home. People think everything suddenly feels right again, but the morning after the court's decision, I woke up to a silence so heavy it pressed on my chest. I was home, back in the house I built, the one I had fought for, yet it didn't sound the same. The walls seemed to breathe differently. The old floorboards groaned like they were remembering too. Victory had its own kind of loneliness. Walter stopped by that afternoon with flowers and a small smile. You did it, Margaret, he said. You got it all back. I nodded, but he must have seen it, that faraway look in my eyes. He sighed softly. Winning doesn't always feel like what we expect. No, I whispered, it doesn't. He sat with me on the porch for a while, sipping tea. The wind carried the smell of pine and the faint laughter of neighbourhood children. It struck me how time moves on, even when you're standing still. Do you think they'll ever come back? I asked quietly. He hesitated. Maybe someday. Guilt has its own way of haunting people, but for now, you have your peace. Don't let them steal that too. Peace. The word tasted strange on my tongue, like something I hadn't earned yet. That night I walked through the house slowly, touching every surface. The banister Tom had carved, the kitchen window I used to lean against while watching the kids play outside, the old rocking chair by the fire. It felt like walking through a museum of my own life. I ended up in Claire's old room. The wallpaper was faded now, the posters long gone, but on the shelf sat a small jewellery box I hadn't noticed before. Inside it, folded neatly, was a note written in her teenage handwriting. Mom, I'm sorry I yelled at you. You're the best mom ever. The edges were worn, the ink smudged, but it hit me harder than any courtroom victory ever could. I sat on the bed and cried. Not because of anger, but because somewhere beneath all that betrayal, love still existed. Buried maybe, forgotten maybe, but still there. Weeks passed. The town began to move on, as towns always do. Some people still looked at me with pity, others with pride. I learned to ignore both. Instead, I started filling my days with small things that made me feel alive again. I volunteered at the community library, helping children with reading, their little voices, their curiosity. It reminded me of when Adam and Claire were that age, when the world was simple. I started gardening again too. The soil felt good under my hands, grounding, real. The roses came back first, deep crimson ones that Tom had planted decades ago. They bloomed stubbornly as if they'd been waiting for me. Walter visited often. Sometimes we talked about the case, but mostly we talked about life. Old music, movies, the strange ways people heal. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he said, You know, Margaret, revenge might have started all this, but it's not what defines you. I smiled faintly. No, it's what woke me up, though, he chuckled. Then I suppose it served its purpose. I didn't hear from Adam or Claire for months. Then, one morning in late spring, a letter arrived. The envelope was plain, the handwriting shaky but familiar. It was from Adam. Open quote, Mom. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve it, but I wanted to tell you that I sold the city house. We've paid back what we owed. Claire's been quiet since the trial. She's not doing well, but she talks about you sometimes. I think she's ashamed. I am too. I thought I was protecting my family, but I was only protecting my pride. You taught me better, and I forgot that. I'm sorry. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. I understand if you don't. Adam, close quote. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it on the mantel. Forgiveness wasn't something I could give right away. It wasn't simple, but knowing that he had written it, that he had felt something, was enough for now. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I whispered to the empty air, I forgive you, but I won't forget. And I realized something beautiful in that moment. Revenge had given me back my strength. but forgiveness would give me back my peace. The house on Maple Street felt alive again, not with the sounds of children's laughter, but with the quiet hum of a woman who had rebuilt herself from ashes. Sometimes the neighbours would pass by and wave, and I'd wave back, smiling, not out of bitterness or triumph, but out of quiet gratitude. Because I was still standing, because I had found my voice, because even after everything, hope had a way of blooming again, like those stubborn roses by my window. The following year came gently, like a long sigh after a storm. Winter melted slowly into spring, and the cold edges of my heart began to soften too. I had spent the last few months learning how to live again. Not as a mother who had been wronged, not as a woman who had fought and won, but simply as Margaret. The roses outside bloomed brighter than they had in years. The house felt warm again. I began to leave the curtains open, letting sunlight pour across the wooden floors that once felt so lonely. One Sunday afternoon, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, my breath caught. It was Claire. She looked smaller somehow, her hair tied back, her face pale, her eyes carrying the kind of guilt that years can't hide. She held a single lily in her trembling hands. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. "Can I come in?" I hesitated for a heartbeat. Then I stepped aside. "Of course, Claire." She walked through the hallway, looking around as though seeing the house for the first time. "It feels different," she murmured. "It's the same," I said gently. "Maybe we're the ones who've changed." We sat at the kitchen table, the one where I used to serve pancakes on Sundays when she was little. "I don't know how to start," she said after a while. "I've gone over it 100 times in my head. What we did was unforgivable." I reached for my tea, my hands steady now. "You were scared," I said. "You thought taking control meant protecting your future. You forgot that I was part of it." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I hurt you, Mom. I hurt the person who loved me the most." For a long moment I didn't speak. The ticking of the old clock filled the silence between us. Then I reached across the table and took her hand. "You did," I said honestly. "But we don't heal by hiding from the truth. We heal by facing it." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands like a child again. I moved around the table and held her, my heart both breaking and mending at the same time. Forgiveness, I realised, wasn't about pretending the pain never happened. It was about allowing love to survive it. Over the next few weeks, Claire began visiting more often. Sometimes she brought groceries, sometimes just stories about her job, her friends, her regrets. She even started helping me tend to the garden. One afternoon, while trimming the rose bushes, she smiled shyly. "Remember when Dad used to say your roses were the pride of Maple Street?" I laughed softly. "He also used to say I talked to them too much." She smiled, looking down. Maybe they needed someone to listen. Her words lingered long after she left that day. A month later, Adam called. His voice was rougher than I remembered, but there was something genuine in it, a wariness that carried truth. "Mom," he said, "Claire told me she saw you. I want to come by too, if that's all right." I paused. "It's all right, Adam?" He arrived that weekend, holding a box of pastries from the old bakery on Main Street, the same place we used to go when he was 10. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, like a boy again. "You look good, Mom," he said. "So do you," I replied, smiling faintly. We didn't talk much at first, but sometimes silence is its own kind of forgiveness. Later, he walked into the backyard and stopped at the swing set Tom had built decades ago. "You never took it down?" he said quietly. "No," I said. "Some things deserve to stay." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "I'm sorry." "I know," I said. From then on, they came together, both Adam and Claire. Not every week, not always comfortably, but they came. They helped me repaint the porch, fixed the broken fence, planted new flowers. Sometimes we didn't talk about the past at all. Sometimes we did. But there was no bitterness left, only a soft ache, the kind that reminds you you've lived. One evening, as the three of us sat on the porch watching the sunset, Claire rested her head on my shoulder. "You really forgave us, didn't you?" she whispered. I smiled, feeling the warmth of her hair against my cheek. "I did," I said. "But don't mistake forgiveness for forgetting. What happened changed us. Maybe that's what it was meant to do." Adam looked out at the horizon, his voice low. "I used to think you were weak for not fighting back, Mom. I see now that you were stronger than all of us." I looked at both of them, my grown children, broken and mended, flawed and human, and felt a deep, quiet peace. The next morning, I walked through the garden again. The roses were in full bloom, brilliant against the morning light. I whispered to them, like I used to, "Tom, you'd be proud." They came back. A soft breeze brushed my cheek, and I closed my eyes, feeling him there, in the sunlight, in the rustle of leaves, in the life that went on. They say every life has two springs, the one you're born into and the one you build after you've been broken. For me, the second spring came late, but it came. And this time it wasn't built on blind love or sacrifice. It was built on truth, forgiveness, and the quiet strength of a woman who refused to let her story end in sorrow. As I sat on the porch, the light of the setting sun spilling across the yard, I smiled and whispered, "This house, my house,